So for the last couple of talks, we were looking at historical perspective. How has the economy changed, politics changed, culture changed over the years, and how has that brought us to where we are today in a creative age and with a very different kind of milieu than in these previous eras. And in the talk today, we're really going to be looking at not only has it changed economy and politics and culture, but it's changed us as human beings. It's changed how we think, how we act, even physiologically, the way we are as human beings. So what is the psychology and the physiology of a person in the creative age? So appropriately to talk about the psychology and the lifestyle of people in the creative age, we're here at the C Psychology building on the campus. And actually this is a place where they do research into a lot of the kinds of things we're talking about today, and we'll be pointing that out some. But the point I want to make here is that, you know, we're different human beings than we were in the agricultural age. And just imagine the lifestyle of a person in the agricultural age. So like you get up before dawn and you get dressed and you go outside and you start doing really, really hard labor. And you do hard labor for 12 hours a day. And it's just constant. And you do that 7 days a week because that cow has to be milked on Saturday and Sunday just like they do every other day of the week. And your life is solid work, and it's hard physical work. You take in 3 or 4 times as many calories as we eat today because you burn those calories. You have to do that really hard work. You're just a different human being. So not only does your body have to be stronger and beefier to do this heavy work, but also your mind has to be different. Your psychological state has to be different. You have to be able to take the routine because every day is the same and you're doing the same thing all day, every day. Now, you're not going to get a promotion in 2 years and move on to a different kind of job. It ain't going to happen for your whole life. This is your life. You do the same thing over and over and over again. And not only that, but this isn't something you chose. You're a farmer because your parents were farmers and their parents were farmers, and it wasn't like you had any say about what you do. Now, just think of how psychologically, that's just a completely different way to exist as a human being. So yeah, huge difference between us as human beings in the agricultural age or in the creative age. But also even in more recent times, the change from an organizational age to a creative age has been phenomenal. So I can remember the first job I had when I was still in college working for an architecture firm. Oh my God, you had to be there right at 8 o'clock in the morning. You had to wear a button-down pastel colored shirt. Everyone wore exactly the same kind of shirt. You wore a sport coat and you wore a tie to work. This is in the summer in Houston, Texas. But we're all dressed like that. You get to work in the morning, you take the jacket off, you put it in the coat closet in the front. You go and you work at your desk until 10:30. At 10:30, you have a coffee break. And everybody stops work, everybody goes downstairs, and everyone in the entire building has a coffee break at the same time. So all us young guys were like ogling the secretaries of the insurance company, and so this whole 15-minute break there. Have your donut, and then you go back up, you work until noon, and then at noon, everybody has lunch from noon to 1. And you go downstairs to the cafeteria, you have your lunch, you come back exactly at 1 o'clock, you start working again, you work until your coffee break at 3:30, you have another 15-minute coffee break, and then you work until 5 o'clock. And everyone in the whole building is on this routine, this cycle. That is so different from the way we work in a creative age. Who the heck wears that kind of clothes in Texas in the summertime? Who the heck, has everybody routinized into that same pattern of work? This is the difference in the organizational age, where you're meant to be a cog in a wheel, and you're working together as part of that big machine, which was very, very productive and very, very efficient, but not a good context for creativity. And this was built into everything in the society. Back then in the organizational age, if you're going to an elementary school, you see identical classroom, 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 classroom. Each of them has rows of chairs all set up facing the teacher. All the little children, it's very important that you sit up straight. You're taught to sit up straight in your desk. And you're supposed to behave yourself and be very, very proper, even as a little kid. I grew up at the end of that era, and I can remember we had on our report cards. The left-hand side of the report card was what you made in your subjects. The right-hand side of the report card was about your deportment, your behavior. And the very top line there was disciplines himself or herself. Could you discipline yourself to sit in your chair and be a good boy or girl? And I will tell you, I could not. I did fine on the left-hand side of the report card, but I sucked at disciplines himself. I couldn't sit still. I was a little kid. I wanted, it was just torture to be put into that box. But that's what the organizational age was about. Nowadays, you go to an elementary school. In my office, we recently did a Montessori school in a very disadvantaged neighborhood in East Austin. Fantastic project. Loved working on that. What a cool school that is. All the little kids are, on a rug on the floor, squirming around, in their little groups, doing little projects together. Sometimes they're outside, sometimes they're inside, sometimes they're all by themselves, sometimes they're in a group of 6 or 8 kids. I mean, that's education in a creative age. Totally different than education in the organizational age. So the point is, we've become different human beings in the creative age. And we need to nurture that and make sure it's helping us really be the best we possibly can be at creative problem solving. So what does this class have to do with how you make yourself into a kind of person that's appropriate for the creative age? And I would say there are 3 possibilities here. One possibility is, maybe you just learn about what it's like to be in a creative age and to do creative activities, and you just learn the information. And believe me, you'll do fine on the test and you'll make a good grade in the class, and you can just say, this was useful information. And I think it is useful information, but you can say, it's not going to really impact me personally that much. Or a second option is you can say, I'm kind of interested in some of these skills. I would like to get more confidence, be able to take risks more, and to feel comfortable with that. I'm going to work on that. Or I would like to be more comfortable with indeterminacy and to be able to walk into a situation that's vague, that is not established, and feel like I can negotiate in this territory. So you could just pick up skills and capabilities. But a third way of taking this class is to say, I'm kind of all in here. I want to learn to be a creative person, and that has more to do than just learning a few skills. It's actually leading a life that is stimulating and that gives me ideas and helps me come up with solutions that I wouldn't come up with otherwise. Gives me experiences that helps my imagination grow and be fertile. So a third option is to actually think of, how do I shape my experiences, my lifestyle, my world, in order to make myself better at creative problem solving? Okay, so the next step is to think exactly about what the reading is for this week. which is in the book Drive by Dan Pink. And in that book, he talks about motivation. And he talks about motivation in the context of being a creative person. This is fundamental to having the right psychology for creative problem solving. So in that book, he says there are 3 modes through history. And he's not referring to Richard Florida's 5 phases, but it's really the same point. But he's saying that long ago in the agricultural era, that people were working on motivation 1.0. And motivation 1.0 is survival. I do these things because I got to keep food in my belly, because I got to survive. And so you're not thinking about, is this fun? No, it's just survival, and that's your motivation. And then at a certain point, culture moves into motivation 2.0, which is carrot and stick. Then you begin to be able to get compensation for your work or for your effort, and that motivates you. Or maybe it's a matter of, if you don't do this work, you're going to get your head beat. And so there's a stick here, and you get motivated by that. So all through industrial age, it's very much about carrot and stick. And it's about compensation for work. And you're motivated by carrots and sticks. But now Dan Pink is talking about motivation 3.0. And that, he says, is characteristic of our own age. And that is intrinsic motivation. I'm doing this because I'm passionate about it, because I want to do it, because I'm excited about it, because it fulfills me. And that's motivation 3.0. And motivation 3.0 is ideal for a creative age and for creative problem solving. So one of the things that Dan Pink talks about in this book, Drive, is that actually to do creative work, you need intrinsic motivation. It's not as easy to do creative work based on carrot and stick motivation or based on survival motivation. You need intrinsic motivation. And he bases a lot of that on research that's been done by a woman named Teresa Amabile. She's at Harvard Business School, and it's not all her research, sometimes it's other people's research, but she's looking at especially the way people are motivated to do creative work. So one of the studies she looks at is a pretty famous study that was done with a bunch of preschool children. And these preschool children were tested according to how much they like to draw. So some of the children really just intrinsically like to draw. They got a lot of satisfaction, totally intrinsic motivation. So they identified in the whole kind of preschool group who are the kids who really like to draw. And there were about 60 of them that they realized really like to draw. So then they took those 3 groups of kids, and those 3 groups were then given very different contexts to work in for a period of about 3 weeks. Now, that's the kind of social science experiment that's done here at UT as well. We're at what's called the lab school in the C Psychology building. And this is a place where they have these kids that come here all the time. My kids, both of my sons, went to lab school. They were guinea pigs in a lot of these experiments, but it's a fantastic preschool that just happens also to use those kids for these social science experiments. So these 3 groups of kids who like to draw were put in 3 different spaces. In the first space, the kids were told, draw as much as you want, or play with the other games and toys and things like that, do whatever you want. And they drew like crazy. Then the second group, they were told exactly the same thing, but if they drew a lot, at the end of the day, they were given a prize, and they were really complimented for how well they drew and how much they drew. And then the third group was treated differently. They were told at the beginning, if you draw a lot, we're going to give you a prize at the end of the day. But if you don't draw so much, that's fine. You can play with the other things, but you won't get a prize at the end of the day. So they had these 3 groups. They operated for about 3 weeks. The first group, did great. The second group did great. The third group, they all did lots and lots of drawing. Then they put all the kids back in the larger preschool and then watch their behavior. And in particular, we're interested in how much do they draw? How much do they do that creative act after they've had that experience? And the first group that had no prizes, they drew like crazy. They did like they did before. The second group, they also drew like crazy. They enjoyed it like they did before. But the third group, who had gotten a carrot and stick, who got used to this notion that if I draw, I get a reward, but now I'm back in the big group and there's no reward anymore, they stopped drawing. Their intrinsic motivation was gone. Their intrinsic motivation was gone because they had been motivated, they'd been trained to be motivated by carrot and stick. And when the carrot and stick wasn't there anymore, they had no more intrinsic motivation. Now, the conclusion that Teresa Amabile draws from that is that at a certain point, you can take that carrot and stick motivation, which is on the left side of your brain, and you can make that dominant so that a normal right side of the brain activity like drawing, if you've moved it over to that carrot and stick left side of the brain and you've made it transactional, then in fact, you're probably not going to have the same motivation that you would have when it was on the right side of the brain and it was intrinsic. So, the lesson they draw from that, if you want to do creative work, you've got to have intrinsic motivation. And carrot and stick motivation can actually deter creative work. So there's another social science experiment that Teresa Amabile depends on a lot in making her argument that creative work works best when there's intrinsic motivation. So in this one, they're working with college students, not with little kids. And in this case, they give all of the college students they give them a box of tacks, they give them a candle, and they give them some matches. And they put them by a table that's next to a wood wall. And in that context, they divide them into two groups. In the first group, they say, just solve this problem. The problem is to locate the candle and light it and put it in a place where the dripping wax will not fall on the table. So using the stuff we've given you, figure out a way to light the candle and keep the wax from dripping on the table. And then they have another group, and that group has the same problem, the same materials, but they tell them, if you do it quickly, if you're in the top 5 people to finish, then we give you $5. So there's a reward for doing this quickly. So we have everybody do it. Everybody ends up solving the problem. But the group that were given the reward, on average, it took them 3.5 minutes longer to solve the problem than the group that had no carrot and stick motivation. So if it was intrinsic motivation, you could solve that problem faster than if it was extrinsic motivation, carrot and stick motivation, that was superimposed on it. And again, Teresa Amabile is saying, if you're just trying to solve this problem creatively, it's on the right side of your brain. If you're given carrot and stick motivation, then it starts moving to the left side of your brain, and honestly, you can't solve the problem as easily because that's not the part of your brain that solves creative problems well. So, can you believe that? I mean, does that ring true for you? That if we're really going to do creative problem solving, we need to have intrinsic motivation. And that extrinsic motivation can sometimes deter you from effective creative problem solving. Now, this is something I definitely want us to talk about in our check-in. So think about it. Develop an opinion on it. And let's have a discussion when we get to class. Okay, see you later.